they worked together on it about the women in Rupert's life. And Jenny, a very shy person and a bit of a reluctant speaker, came across so well. You know, I mean, I think she impressed everybody when she was giving her talk and also answering questions and everything else. She was a great friend of the society. She used to produce a picture now and again, or not now and again, over a number of years, for us to use at the raffle, and was very pleased to do it. And only when her eyesight was diminishing did she stop doing that. We've fortunately been contacted by Kate Kisler, her daughter, who's the young lady along there, who has been archiving her mother's work, and it is all displayed along, or the major parts of it are displayed along the table there for you to look at later and to talk to Kate about. But I would like to thank Kate very much for coming along and entertaining us today. I'm sure you're going to find what she has to say very, very interesting. I mean, there are a few other family relatives around as well, who Kate will introduce you to in the course of time. But Jenny's work is, to my opinion, as I say, was one of the best of the Rupert artists after Bestall backed up. I'm sure you can judge for yourself when you see what you see on the table there. And the family have also agreed that the archive will go to the society, as Jenny wished, and they've also agreed that we can include odd pieces, not too many, one a year, in the raffle every year, so that you might get the opportunity to own a piece of Jenny's published artwork, because they will be pieces that have appeared in Annuals. Anyway, what I'll do with them, you've heard me yapping enough, I'll hand you over to Kate, who's going to introduce her mother's work.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having us here. As John has kindly said, I'm called Katie. Mum always called me Katie rather than Kate. And this is my brother Matt, always called Matthew by Mum. And my cousin Janine and her husband Tim. And Tim's mum was a huge Rupert fan, so he's quite excited to be here as well and be part of this. Now, Mum was a prolific diary writer and very careful collector of information and things that she thought were useful or interesting, and she kept meticulous records of her work, and in particular her Rupert work. I think nowadays she'd have been called a hoarder. No, definitely. The house was never, you didn't have to skirt past boxes or anything, but when we had to clear out the house, we discovered they were meticulous hoarders, both Mum and Dad, and they kept amazing records of absolutely everything, even down to our old artwork from school, all in folders, labelled, which was quite a shock for us, wasn't it? But she always wanted her Rupert archive to be presented to the followers, and I had the opportunity to catalogue it before sending it with Christine to last year's meeting, and I understand a small proportion of it was displayed. So there is a selection out, and obviously there are boxes with more correspondence in, huge numbers of letters to and from Mum and the Daily Express. But the question earlier about the size of Bestall's pictures can be answered by the one I've stood up, because they are copies of Bestall's work that Mum was given to try and copy his style. So that's the size that it was. That's just an aside. So when I was asked to do this talk and help present Mum's archive to you, my first reaction, in all honesty, was absolute panic, closely followed by pride at having been asked. I've always known that Rupert was a huge part of Mum's life, and I'm immensely proud of what she's done and what she's been able to leave as a legacy, both with the Rupert archive and with her paintings, which she did in later life, which are displayed around the country in private houses and in some public buildings. And through her, Rupert has always been part of my life. And I think Matt's 2 years younger than me, and we were talking about this, and his memories of it are quite different to mine. I think just because of the slight age gap. And just as an aside, several years ago, I wanted to get a tattoo that represented different elements in my life. And Mum's representation for the tattoo was so easy to pick. It was a Rupert scarf. So it gives you some idea of kind of the impact that the bear has had on the Kisler family. Now, I'm hoping to keep this talk fairly informal, as I just want to share with you a bit about Mum, about Jenny as a person and her art and the way she worked, rather than trying to talk about her Rupert art specifically, as there are lots of people far better qualified to talk about that than I am, as was witnessed in the Rupert quiz last night, which we were rubbish at. I'm happy to try and answer questions at the end, if you have any, but I think really the archive hopefully speaks for itself, and you will enjoy just looking at it. And Mum put notes and things in there, so hopefully that will be of interest. Now, I was trying to think back sort of memories of Mum working, and illustrations, painting, sketching and other artists have always been part of Mum's life, and therefore part of mine. She always took sketchbooks on holiday with us, and she liked to draw from real life where possible. My grandparents, so Mum's parents, and her grandfather were keen sketchers and amateur watercolourists as well. So she grew up with those influences and always having art around her. And also, for those of us of a certain age, you may remember a Brownie box camera. And she would take a huge number of photographs whenever we were away or out. And she would use those as references when we returned from holidays. Our dad also sketched, but on an amateur level, but very different subjects, as he liked mainly boats in the sea, and there'd quite often be little stick figures on the beach, nothing too artistic. But Mum also felt it was important to pass her skills on to the next generation, and so she spent time with my nephew and niece, encouraging them to paint and draw. And I think she'd be really proud to know that my niece has inherited her artistic ability and is now sending her portfolio to prospective employers as she tries to secure a tattoo apprenticeship. When Mum was working, she usually tried to do it when Matt and I were at school or at an after-school activity, but sometimes if a deadline was looming, she'd have to work when we were at home. Now, she used the dining room table to work on, and if the dining room door was shut, we knew that she wasn't to be disturbed. That was her working area. She also didn't like anyone seeing her work partway through, but when something was completed, she would stand it on the metal fireguard in the dining room, and we were encouraged to comment on it. We had to be objective though. We couldn't just go, I like that or I don't like that. We had to say why and evaluate. Was it the colour? Was it the subject matter? What was it that we liked about it or didn't like? You know, she would take criticism. She always said, though, that drawing family was really hard to do, probably because you know the person's features so well that it's hard to kind of look at us objectively. But that didn't stop Matt and I appearing in multiple paintings and in references for illustrations. Now, another reference source was somewhere that I have very fond memories of. I've been talking to some people over yesterday, and we were very fortunate to be living in Woollerton in Nottingham, and there are a couple of people from Nottingham, and we lived within walking distance because Mum never learnt to drive, so what we did, we generally walked or got the bus. Now, Woollerton Hall had numerous taxidermy exhibits, which Mum used for references as well. And she was even given access to a room behind the scenes where she could access stored exhibits that were not currently on display, which she found really useful to use. And recently, a friend visited the hall and put photos on Facebook, and I was so relieved to see that it remains pretty much unchanged. And there was an orangutan that used to stand at the bottom of the stairs in the big hallway. And he's still there, in situ, despite looking a bit more threadbare, I think. But he's still there, so that was lovely. Now, as some of you may know, Mum sadly suffered from dementia in later life, but Rupert was constant throughout that too. She could be found with a sketch pad, happily drawing little Rupert heads for the other residents and staff in her care home. She was very fortunate that one of the heads of care at the home spent time finding out about Mum and about what she'd done. And when she realised that she had a minor celebrity in her midst, she encouraged Mum to draw and re-engage with her artistic side again, which we were really happy about. So Mum's early days and career, now I'm using the book that John mentioned, which is Rupert and the Women in His World, which Mum was involved in. I'm going to take some of the words that she said, because I don't see the point in reinventing something when she said it so well. Now, she said, Rupert Bear has been part of my life for as long as I can remember, firstly as the traditional gift of a teddy for a baby, and although not particularly like Rupert, given that name by my mother, and then as a reward for good behaviour at the dentist, in the form of a Mary Torto yellow book. I could never be quite sure if the book would materialise, so it didn't seem like a bribe, but it did make the journey to the dentist across London by bus and tram worthwhile. And at Christmas came the eagerly awaited Rupert Annual with its bright colours and its ability, by the flick of a page, to transport a child to a magical world and tranquil cottage far away from the wartime shelter in our back garden. Now I thought back to that and I thought, yeah, Mum was born in 1935 and obviously World War II was 39 to 45, so she, between 4 and 10 she would have been at times in the shelter, and that's where she kind of, the Rupert Annuals really made an impression on her. Now, she wanted to go to art school, but our grandpa was quite high up in one of the London hospitals. We think it was Brompton, don't we? Yeah, and I think he'd have been called the chief registrar or something similar. But he was keen for Mum to have a proper job, in inverted commas. But he wanted her to be happy and encouraged her as well to pursue her dream. But he did say that he gave her 2 years to prove that she could make a go of her chosen profession. Grandpa apparently said if he saw Mum getting in with the wrong crowd or looking unwashed, then it would be no more art school. But she made a success of the 4 years at the Byam Shaw School of Art in London, and she made lasting friendships with the people she met there, and she remained washed, which was a relief. But also she shared a flat with some other girls, and there was a lad's flat upstairs which our dad rented, not at the same time we believe, but they ended up meeting on a boat on the Norfolk Broads, where both sets of flat sharers were all got together. So yeah, the art school did all right for Mum, I think. And during the last year at art school, the students were expected to start job hunting, and part of this was to approach studios and publishers with their portfolios. Now, I have Mum's notes here, again, meticulous note taker, on the feedback that some of the contacts she approached. And reading them, which I'll share with you in a minute, I realised how demoralising and hard work it must have been to physically carry your portfolio around London, to have the door closed in your face so many times. Now, a tiny selection of the feedback is, this is quite a positive one, so take a chance and go freelance, you're good enough. You draw much better than the majority of students who want jobs and have good colour sense. Now, the one that I picked out as being really negative is, you haven't a cat in hell's chance of freelancing. Oh. Not very positive and not very, not building up a youngster's confidence. So I think it's a testament to her determination and focus that she carried on and got what she wanted. She got her break when she met Mr. Speck at Wardlock. From her own account of the meeting, he said he liked her drawings, but she didn't have experience. Now, having heard similar comments before, she realised that this was a pivotal moment, and she pointed out that if no one would give her a chance, then how could she gain experience? Mr. Speck then gave Mum her first book commission, sort of took a chance on her, but also put her forward to his friend at the Daily Express, Mr. Freddie Chaplain, as he thought he might be interested in her work. Mum always spoke really fondly of Chappie, as she called him, and she worked for him for a long, long time. She had one meeting with Mr. Bestall, arranged by Chappie, at the very start of the working relationship, and she said that her work must have been acceptable, as she never saw Bestall again. She was what was known as a stockpile artist, where her style emulated Bestall's, so this could be used if Bestall was pushed for time or was unwell, to ensure the public never knew he didn't do all the illustrations himself. And another term Mum used about herself was ghost artist. So again, you know, she was behind the scenes. And you very kindly, John, said earlier that you considered Mum to be one of the best. And you said that last night, and that was lovely. Now, cataloguing the archive, it took a fair while, but what struck me most when I was going through everything was not just the sheer volume of work and stuff that Mum collected, but also how long it must have taken to get anything to print. If you think about it, there was no internet, no email, no smartphones. We didn't even get a phone till I was 10 and you were 8. So Mum didn't even have a phone to use. So everything had to be done by post. So the work had to be planned so far out to ensure that deadlines were met and to allow for contingencies, additional changes, you know, things out of their control. I don't know whether they did postal strikes back then, but you never know. So you didn't just have to be a good illustrator, but you also had to be really good at getting your point across in a letter, so good English skills, which again, from the volume of letters that you'll see, it was a lot. Now I've noted 3 particular examples of things that interested me particularly, and I hope they interest you. I have changed them slightly. One is the robin. There's a robin painting, and can I just note, she's written on the back, thank you. Yeah, so she was still J.A. Miles at that time, and it was a study used for the half title for Rupert and the Robins, drawn in 1962. So, and this was where I believe that this robin was in her parents' garden, and she followed it up using a taxidermy one from a museum in London, and I can't think what it's called. Natural History Museum, would it be? Yeah. So I think she did some from life and some from the museum. Now the other one I've got, oh, that's my last one. Hang on, what's the other one? Oh, it's Rupert and Rusty. So there's the original, or Mum's original, and then there's the annual that it appeared in. So you can see kind of you can see any changes, you know, colour changes and so on that were made, because obviously the correspondence back and forth, Mum would submit her work, her draft, and then there would be comments and changes, and then it would go back and she'd do as she was asked and then send it again. And yeah, the last one there, thank you. So this was tryout sketches that Mum did of Rupert's heads. This was the very first Rupert tryout sketches that she did. And that was her father as well. So our grandfather, that was her sketch. And the page of little heads looks not unlike what she used to draw in the care home. Now, I haven't found them yet, but there is also a fan letter, or a couple of fan letters, that Mum got from Australia and that she replied to. The writer signed himself as James, devoted Rupertologist, and he sent his first letter to the Daily Express book departments, and it had been forwarded on to Mum. And if you read the letters, you can see that he was quite a fan of Mum's, and he'd been in correspondence with Mr. Bestall too, and knew a great deal about Rupert, and had his own R&R, or Rupert research, as he called it. So I will try and find that, because that is, I think, quite interesting. Well, that's kind of my talk done, and I hope that's given you some idea of what Mum was, how Mum worked and what she was about, and how important Rupert was to her. Now, please feel free to look at the archive. I would ask that anything, if you take an envelope to have a look at it, keep everything into that one envelope and put it back, but feel free to, you know, have a look. Has anyone got any questions?
Sorry, Kate, before we go to take questions
Yeah.
from the floor, could I just interrupt? Because I just before the meeting, I was given a mission.
Oh, okay.
I was given a mission, and because the person who gave me the mission is still here, I would like you, John, to briefly encapsulate the task you have set me before we leave this room and Kate leaves, so that Kate knows what it's
John, have I?
Kate knows what it's
I'm
going
the
to
lucky
be,
one.
and our members know what it will be in terms of the future of the archive.
Yeah, well, I touched briefly on it in my introduction, and I've had a long chat with Kate and her brother because they were disconcerted about the archive being broken up. But within the wishes of their mother, she was keen to support the society, as I said before. And one of the things that Kate and I have discussed is the possibility of picking out the odd picture that we can use in the raffle. You know, as you know, we find it difficult to find raffle prizes that are unique and interesting and this sort of thing to keep ticket sales promoted. And I think that Jenny would have been very, very enthusiastic about us using a piece of her original artwork that had been published in a Rupert Annual for that purpose. It's not going to interfere with the archive because the picture is already in print in the annual. So as far as a research facility item, it doesn't really add anything to the archive. But the archive is pretty comprehensive. I've looked through it myself, and Kate and her brother have agreed that we can do that for 4 or 5 years approximately and pick out a piece. And I'm going to I've asked Roger if he can go with Kate and have a look at it later on, and before it disappears from the room, and pick out some pieces that both of them think would be ideal for it. As I said before, Jenny produced pictures for us over the years to use in the raffle, and she was very keen about the raffle and supporting the society in that way. And it was only when her eyesight started going that she could no longer do it, and she apologised profusely to me. But I mean, that was nature's things about nature, and there was nothing neither of us could do about it. But I'm pretty sure that she would be very pleased, as part of her legacy to us, that we use some of the images for raffle prizes, and they will be well promoted within the newsletter, and hopefully ticket sales will go through the roof, as they should do. Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, as I say, I've chatted to Kate and her brother about this. They are happy to do that, and they don't think it will diminish the archive at all, and neither do I. But it will enhance followers' funds and also Jenny's reputation. And just on one thing, you mentioned there letters from Australia from a chap called James. Just as an aside, I know who that was. It was a chap called James Williamson. And if any of you are old enough to have an original index that I produced, you will see him given credit in there for helping me with it. He got involved with the index at the same time. So, I mean, there's a lot of cross-pollination between James in Australia, the index, Jenny, and also Bestall. So there've been sort of Rupert enthusiasts out there for a considerable number of years. Anyway, I think your talk was brilliant, Kate, and I thank you very much for it. And I hope people, we won't take questions from the floor unless there's anything you want to, but if you speak to Katie and her brother afterwards, if you've got something that's interesting or want to know something, I should be probably only too pleased. Are you happy to do it that way?
Yeah.
Unless there's a serious question that you think would benefit everybody, you can put your hand up. I'll take up to 3, no more. Well, there's 2.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. I wanted it clearly understood, and you've explained it in more detail than I could possibly remember. But I wanted people, members, followers, to understand that why is the chairman just going out of the room with 4 pieces of Jennifer's art?
Right, I'll take the gentleman there with a question.
It was well known that Bestall put real people as characters.
Can you speak up a bit?
Yes, sorry. I'll stand up. So it's well known that Bestall in his art put real people as characters in his. I just wanted to ask if Mum ever put yourself or your brother in any of hers.
Not in the Rupert stuff, because one of the things in the archive is a pile of references. I'll just, Janine, can you just, it's a huge pile, and each Rupert character has got lots and lots of little pictures, which Mum then used to emulate the style. So each of the characters, she's got like a reference page for. So she already had them to use. I don't think she needed to kind of create any characters. Everything that she was given was kind of predefined.
So we did appear as references in non-Rupert artwork.
Yeah.
And so I suppose if there was one of the rare human characters, or almost human characters from Rupert, sort of the body shape might have been sketched, but we were certainly never recognisably featured.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. John Lester at the back, he's always got something to say. John?
It's just, what was the first annual to contain her work, and what was the story?
Oh, no.
Now that's a technical question.
Look it up in the index if you've got that. You're getting a bit too technical, John.
Yeah.
So
No.
what were the dates that Mum worked? You had
56, that's when she first made the approach, and I think it was about 59 that she actually kind of did more.
And I think we've got a box of the annuals in the archive, which is all the ones that Mum
She's put little
contributed
She's
to.
put little markers in each one, denoting whether it was a half title or whatever it was she'd done in it. Yeah.
I can tell you she was employed before Bestall finally picked up, because Chaplain was trying to build up a store of stories to use after Bestall was retiring. And if you look at the archive, you'll see, as Katie has said, how many correspondences there were for her to get it right. I mean, I'm surprised she didn't lose patience with him, because he was a fussy old sod. And, you know, I mean, he was making suggestions right, left and centre, and, you know, I mean, Jenny's patience must have been immense to sort of keep putting up with that and slightly changing everything. But Katie will show you later some of the examples there, I'm sure, of where she's made comments and changed it and wanted this changed and that changed. Yeah, so anybody else got a question? Otherwise, I will hand over to Katie and the family to take you through the bits and pieces, and if you care to go up there and have a look at it, then if you've got any questions, Katie and family will be only too happy to answer them, I'm sure. So a big round of applause, please.
There's the dragon again.
You were able to look at this last year, did you? You were here last year, weren't you?
Yeah.
So she would always write colour notes when she was sketching.
She started as like the girls were quite.
No, these are the ones, those are their Bestalls that she then copied. So they're her reference ones.
She found it in 1980. So I think she was
Very much a sort of a working.
So she had people round to the house, and she just...
She was definitely talented.
Yeah.
Because
Oh, I need to show. Oh, actually, can I just borrow that? I'm just going to go and show.
we only know because she's written this text. No, because she did it so close. Yeah.
And it is Rupert and the Starman, and it's an original piece of framed artwork by Stuart Potter.
You see the details that they put into it.
Slowly. Right, the raffle is down there.